An interview with a takeover specialist.
You're an entrepreneur who buys failed companies, is that right?
Yes.
And what is the structure of your company?
I run my business as a holding company. I look for a takeover target, buy it, restructure it, and then sell it. I have no interest in running the target company, and the industry sector also doesn't matter.
We're talking about buying companies where the shares are held privately, right?
Yes.
And where for some reason the company isn't doing well and some of the shareholders want to sell.
That's right. Usually there's some kind of a crisis situation and I can buy the shares very cheaply. I always negotiate confidentially. For example, I don't buy all the shares in my own name. I don't want the other shareholders to know who is accumulating shares and how many, because then they will increase their price to me.
When you buy a company, do you leave the original management in place or do you put your own guys in there?
Let's start with the CEO. I keep the CEO if they have a finance background, because with me they're going to be focused on figures and profitability. I hate it when the CEO talks about dreams and vision. It was their vision that got the company into a mess in the first place.
And the other managers?
Remember that it's usually a hostile takeover. The senior management know nothing about the change of ownership. When they find out, they are always against us. They know that I'm going to shake up the company and some will lose their jobs. But in general, I try to keep most of the management in place because they know how to run the business, even if they were doing it badly. Of course, I give them new instructions.
Which are?
To cut costs.
So what are the typical cost-cutting measures that you would take? How do you cut costs without hitting sales?
I restructure the company. That means removing staff who are unnecessary or who are performing poorly. One thing you nearly always find in failing companies is too many employees. The boss doesn't have the courage to fire them because they have been there for a long time or something like this. But I don't just fire people. Restructuring means taking out layers of management, consolidating into one office work that was previously done in two, changing job descriptions, making unproductive people take on more work, and so on. So, generally making the company more efficient in its use of resources.
And as an outsider, you can make these radical changes much more easily.
Oh, yes. Of course I'm hated for it, but I do it. It's my business.
So now you've got a restructured company and it's more profitable. Who do you sell it to?
To other private investors, such as private equity groups. We don't do an IPO with a stock market listing because the companies aren't big enough.
Okay, one last question. Do you ever feel any sympathy for the people whose jobs will be lost because of the restructuring?
No, never. Cutting costs is a necessary thing because without it the company would go out of business anyway. In a way, I'm saving the company, saving the jobs that are still left.